A story for the heart, friends. Let me share something that happened back when the West was still finding its way, 1880 to be exact. This isn't one of those tales full of gunfights and outlaws. No, this is about two young people who'd known each other as children. Back when life was simpler and promises were made by creek water under cottonwood trees. You know how life has a way of pulling folks apart? Well, Jacob Wade and Margaret Sullivan learned that hard lesson early. He went to war because his father said it would make him a man. She lost her hearing to fever and got sent away because her family didn't know what else to do with a deaf daughter. But the good Lord has a way of bringing people back together, even if it takes 15 years and a dusty train depot to do it. So, pour yourself some coffee, the good strong kind, and let me tell you how it all began. The morning smelled of coal smoke and that particular mix of leather and sweat you only found at train depots. Jacob Wade stood on the platform at Abilene, his carpet bag weighing heavy in his left hand, his bad shoulder, the one that still ached when weather was coming, locked up tight as a rusty gate. That's when he saw her. Margaret Sullivan was counting coins in her palm, her lips moving the way folks do when they're figuring sums. The morning sun coming through those grimy depot windows caught the red-brown in her hair she'd pinned up proper like a grown woman. Not loose like when they were young, but she still tilted her head that certain way when concentrating, left ear down, right eye squinting just a touch. Lord have mercy. It was her. Jacob's chest felt like somebody had reached in and squeezed his heart with both hands. 15 years since he'd seen her. 15 years since that afternoon by Willow Creek when she'd taught him to spell words with his fingers, laughing when he got them wrong. 6 months later, the fever had taken her hearing. 6 months after that, his father had dragged him to the recruiting office. Around him, the depot carried on with its morning business. Porters wheeled trunks past on squeaky carts. A baby was fussing something fierce in its mother's arms. Two fellows near the ticket window were arguing about cattle prices, Herefords versus Longhorns. But all Jacob could see was Margaret, standing there in a brown calico dress that had been mended so carefully you had to look close to see the patches. She hadn't heard him call out. Of course she hadn't. His mother had written him about it at Fort Griffin. Her careful Palmer script explaining how the Sullivan girl had burned with fever for 5 days straight. How she'd lived but gone stone deaf. How her family had sent her up to Chicago to live with an aunt. Ashamed of having a daughter who couldn't hear the preacher on Sundays. Margaret stood up from the wooden bench, smoothing down her dress the way his mother used to smooth her apron before company came. She hefted a carpet bag that looked too heavy for her thin frame. The tag tied to it was clear enough for Jacob to read, M. Sullivan, Destination Sage Creek. His stomach dropped like he'd swallowed lead. Sage Creek was 3 days west, deep in cattle country. What earthly business did Margaret have going there? That's Tom Harlan's mail-order bride, a fellow near Jacob said to his companion, nodding toward Margaret with his chin. Came all the way from Chicago. Harlan says she can't hear nothing, but he don't mind none. Says it'll make her a quiet wife. The second fellow chuckled in that mean way some men have. Harlan always did like his women docile. Jacob's fist clenched before he could stop it. Tom Harlan. He knew that name from Fort Griffin, a gambling man who'd won a spread in a card game and played at being a rancher. The kind of fellow who saw people as things to be used up and thrown away. Margaret was checking her ticket against the board, squinting at the chalked times. The 8:47 westbound to Dodge City. Same train Jacob was taking home to Texas. She raised her hand, trying to catch a porter's attention for help with her trunk. The colored fellow looked right at her, saw her gesturing, and kept walking. Muttered something that sounded like deaf and dumb as he passed. She tried again with a young fellow in a checked suit. Pulled out a piece of the paper where she'd written in that careful script he remembered, "Please help with trunk." The young fellow read it, shook his head, and backed away like deafness might be catching. Jacob watched her shoulders drop, just a little. Watched her take one of those deep breaths his mother used to call gathering breaths. Then she grabbed that heavy trunk herself and started dragging it inch by inch toward the luggage car. Her hands, Lord. Even from 20 feet away, he could see they were rough with calluses. Factory work. Had to be. The kind that paid pennies and didn't care if you could hear the machines that could take your fingers quick as lightning. He should help. Should walk right over there and what, say howdy, hello, Margaret, remember me, the boy who kissed you by the creek and promised to come back. The one who let his father drag him off to war, instead of standing up like a man. She'd almost reached the luggage car when the trunk caught on a loose board. She pulled harder. The leather handle tore clean off, and she stumbled backward. Jacob moved without thinking, catching her elbow before she could fall. The smell of her lavender water and clean cotton hit him like a physical thing. She spun around, eyes wide with that particular wariness women traveling alone learned real quick. Then her face went white as fresh paper. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. But he saw his name on her lips, clear as if she'd shouted it. Jacob. He should say something. Do something. But his throat had closed up tight as a fist. All he could do was nod, his hand still on her elbow, her warmth burning through the calico. Her free hand came up slow, trembling like a leaf in wind. Her fingers found that old position, the first sign she'd ever taught him behind the schoolhouse when they were 12. You. Then, like she was remembering herself, remembering where they were and what had passed between them. She yanked her arm away and stepped back. Her face shifted, closing off like shutters before a storm. She bent to grab the broken handle of her trunk, not looking at him, but her hands were shaking. And when she straightened, he saw something that hit him harder than any cavalry charge he'd survived, a single tear track down her left cheek that she didn't bother to wipe away. The station bell clanged loud enough to wake the dead. The 847 was boarding. Margaret picked up her carpet bag and started toward the train, leaving the trunk with its broken handle right there on the platform. After 3 steps, she stopped, turned back. Her fingers moved in the air. Quick and sharp signs he only half remembered but understood clear enough. Don't follow, please. Then she was walking away, her back straight as a church pew, toward a train that would take her to Tom Harlan and whatever kind of life a deaf woman with no money and no family could scratch out of a loveless marriage on the frontier. Jacob stood there holding the broken handle of her trunk, watching her brown dress disappear into the crowd of passengers. His discharge papers seemed to burn in his chest pocket, the ones that said he was finally free to go home, to start over, to build something better than what he'd been. He looked down at the trunk. The tag had her name in that careful script they taught in those Chicago factory schools. Inside would be everything she owned in this world. She'd need it at Sage Creek. Tom Harlan wouldn't provide for a wife who came with nothing. The porter was loading the last bags. The engineer was checking his watch, one of those big Waltham Railroad watches that kept perfect time. Jacob picked up Margaret's trunk, tested its weight, heavy but manageable. Nothing compared to cavalry packs. He walked to the ticket window, pulling out his wallet. Need to change my ticket, he said. And I need to check an extra trunk through to Sage Creek. Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The ticket clerk slid the amended paper across the counter. His fingernails yellowed from years of tobacco. That'll be $4 extra for the trunk and moving up to second class. Jacob counted out the bills without looking at them. Through the window, he watched Margaret pull herself up into the emigrant car, third class, where folks sat on hard wooden benches. The steps were high for a small woman. She grabbed the rail with both hands, her carpet bag bumping against her hip like it was fighting her. He waited until she disappeared inside, then walked the length of the platform, boots clicking on the worn boards. The emigrant car's windows were already fogging up from too many folks pressed close together. Through the clouded glass, he caught glimpses of a mother with 3 little ones climbing all over her, 2 old fellows sharing what looked like a bottle of something medicinal, and Margaret finding herself a spot on a bench near the back. Jacob climbed up into the second-class car, one forward from hers, close enough to keep an eye on things, far enough she wouldn't know. The whistle gave a shriek that could wake the dead. The train lurched forward with that particular jolt that always made his stomach flip. Abilene started sliding away, getting smaller like a memory. 20 minutes out, the conductor came through a thin fellow with pomade slicking his hair flat. Jacob followed him between cars. Standing in that connecting space where the wind tried to steal your hat clean off through the door's little window, he watched the conductor reach Margaret's seat. She held up her ticket. "Proper as you please." The conductor said something. She pointed to her ear, shook her head, then pulled out a pencil and paper from her bag. Even from here, Jacob could see the conductor's face go sour as weak old milk. The man snatched her ticket, punched it hard enough the paper tore, and practically threw it back in her lap. Margaret's fingers went to her coin purse. She wrote something, held it up. The conductor shook his head, pointed at the bench, then at the floor, made a gesture like he was laying his head on his hands sleeping. No sleeping berth. Not for 6 cents a mile in emigrant class. Not for a deaf woman traveling alone. The conductor moved on. Margaret sat still for a long moment. Then she unpinned her hat, a plain thing with one tired silk flower, set it careful on her lap, and rubbed her temples with both hands. Her shoulders rolled forward like she was already feeling those 3 days of sitting upright in her bones. At Selena, the first meal stop. Jacob watched her count her coins again. The Harvey House restaurant smelled of good beef stew and fresh cornbread, 35 cents for a full meal. She looked at it, looked at her coins, then bought a 5-cent box of crackers and an apple from the platform vendor instead. Found the water pump, filled a tin cup from her bag, made her supper standing there by the tracks. The porter from the Harvey House was loading fresh linens into the first-class cars. Good wool blankets, the kind that would keep a body warm when the prairie night turned cold enough to see your breath. Jacob caught the porter's sleeve, pressed a silver dollar into his palm. The lady in the emigrant car, brown dress, reddish hair. She gets a blanket tonight. The porter pocketed the coin smooth as butter. She won't know who sent it. That's the general idea. The train rolled into North Platte just as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything the color of butter gone soft. 9 hours since Abilene. 9 hours of Jacob's shoulder cramping from sitting rigid, watching Margaret's car through that little vestibule window. Steam hissed from the engine like an angry cat. The engineer called out 20 minutes for water and coal, his voice carrying over the platform noise. Folks poured out of the cars like beans from a jar, everybody groaning and stretching and hunting for the necessaries. Jacob stepped down onto the platform, keeping his back to the emigrant car. The platform vendor had quite a business going boiled eggs that had seen better days. Bread and butter that cost twice what it should. Coffee in tin cups that'd burn your fingers if you weren't careful. The whole place smelled of coal smoke and prairie dust and that particular sweetness of locomotive grease. He bought coffee he didn't want, turning to scan the crowd while pretending to blow on the steam rising from the cup. Families clustered near the depot like sheep bunching before a storm. Men lined up at the privy, shifting from foot to foot. A woman was selling peppermint sticks to young ones, their mothers counting out pennies. Then Margaret stepped out of the emigrant car. She moved down those steps careful as a cat on a fence, one hand on the rail, the other pressed to the small of her back. Her dress was wrinkled now, dust already settling into the fabric like it belonged there. She walked toward the edge of the platform, away from all the folks and fuss, and stood under one of those new electric arc lamps the railroad had put in. The harsh white light made her look younger somehow, or maybe just more tired. She was rubbing her wrists, the ones he'd noticed were chafed raw, probably from whatever work she'd done in that Chicago factory. Her head tilted back, eyes closed, breathing in air that wasn't thick with other folks' sweat and tobacco spit. Jacob moved without deciding to, his boots making noise on the planks that she'd never hear. He stopped 15 feet away, suddenly feeling like a fool. How did you approach someone who'd asked you not to follow someone you'd failed all those years ago when it mattered? Margaret's eyes opened. She was looking straight at him. Her whole body went stiff as a board. The tin cup in her hand slipped, clattering on the platform loud enough to make folks turn and look. Coffee splashed across the boards, making dark patches in the dust. Neither of them moved. The crowd flowed around them like water around rocks. Somewhere a baby was carrying on something fierce. The engine bell clanged for coal loading, but they just stood there, frozen like one of those tableau scenes at the church socials. Margaret's mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish out of water. Her right hand came up slow, fingers trembling as they formed the letters J-A-C-O-B, not Jake, which is what everybody called him now, Jacob. The way she'd spelled it that summer afternoon by the creek, teaching him the manual alphabet her cousin from the deaf school had shown her. He nodded, took off his hat the way his mother had taught him when greeting a lady. The movement felt stiff, like his body was working without his brain having much say in the matter. Margaret's hand went to her throat. Her eyes were huge in that electric light, still that green-brown that changed with the weather, like creek water over stones. She took a step forward, stopped, took another. Her fingers moved again. Faster now, you. Here. Why? His hands felt clumsy as a newborn colt trying to stand. He signed back, trying to remember what she'd taught him. Going. Home. Texas. She shook her head fierce, like a horse fighting the bit, pointed at herself, then at the train, then made a gesture he didn't need to know sign language to understand. Why are you here? On this train? Now he couldn't sign that answer. Didn't have the words in any language. Instead, he pulled out his pencil and the little notebook he kept for tallying. Wrote in block letters she could read in that harsh light, couldn't let you go alone. She read it twice, 3 times. When she looked up, her jaw was set hard as granite. She snatched the pencil from his hand, wrote below his words, "Not your responsibility." He took the pencil back. You were never anybody's responsibility. That was the problem. A tear escaped down her cheek. She wiped it away angry-like, as if it had betrayed her. Wrote again. Do you know where I'm going? He nodded. Wrote Tom Harlan. I know him. Her face changed then. Something shifted behind her eyes. Might have been hope, might have been fear. Hard to tell in that strange electric light. She wrote quickly, What kind of man? The train whistle shrieked loud enough to make folks jump. 5 minutes. Around them. Passengers were already moving toward the cars like cattle toward the barn at feeding time. Jacob wrote fast gambler. Won a ranch at cards. Not good. Margaret's fingers pressed white against the pencil. She wrote, I know, suspected, but factory closed. 6 letters to other men. All said no when they learned I'm deaf. Harlan only one who said yes. The pain in his chest felt like someone was twisting a knife between his ribs. He grabbed the pencil. There are other ways. She laughed, then no sound. But her shoulders shook with it, bitter as chicory coffee. She wrote, Name one. He started to write, but she grabbed his wrist. Her touch burned through his shirt sleeve like a brand. She shook her head, signed with her free hand. No pity, please. The conductor was calling all aboard in that sing-song way they had. The platform was emptying faster than a church after a long sermon. Margaret pulled her hand away, started back toward the emigrant car. 3 steps, then she turned. Her fingers moved in the air, mixing signs with gestures he could follow. Thank you. Blanket. Last night. She'd known. Of course she'd known. Sharp as ever. His Margaret. No, not his. Not anymore. Food. Today. Saw you. Window. His face burned hot as a stove. She'd seen him watching, trying to help without her knowing. Probably thought he was some kind of fool, following her like a lovesick pup. She took another step backward, toward the train. Her fingers moved again. Slower kind. You always kind. But she pointed at herself, then at the train, then made a gesture like closing a door. My choice, my life. The whistle screamed again. The train lurched, starting to roll. Margaret ran for the emigrant car, catching the rail just as it began to move. She pulled herself up, disappeared inside quick as a card sharp's trick. Jacob stood on the emptying platform, watching that train gather speed like it was running from something. His notebook was still in his hand. On the page, below their conversation, Margaret had written one more line. He hadn't seen her do it. She must have added it when she grabbed his wrist. If you truly want to help, be in Sage Creek. Don't let me disappear. The train was 100 yards gone now, red lanterns shrinking in the dark like dying embers. Jacob looked down at the notebook again. In the margin, she'd drawn something small, a symbol he recognized, the sign for hope she'd taught him all those years ago. He ran for the telegraph office. The operator was already closing up, pulling down the shade. "Wait," Jacob said, pulling out money. "I need to send a wire to Sage Creek. Tonight." The operator sighed the way folks do when their supper's getting cold. But he opened his key. "What's the message?" Jacob thought of Tom Harlan, waiting for his mail-order bride. Thought of Margaret, choosing a bad situation because it was the only choice being offered. "Address it to the Sage Creek Land Office," he said. "Message is interested in purchasing available property. Will arrive on Friday's train. Have cash in hand. Sign it, J. Wade. Captain, retired, Fort Griffin Command." The operator's eyebrows went up. "Captain, you say?" "That's right." "This about that deaf woman on the train." Jacob looked at him sharp. "You know about her." The train rolled through Nebraska darkness, wheels clicking over rail joints in that rhythm that got into your bones. 2 hours past North Platte. 2 in the morning by Jacob's pocket watch. Most folks were sleeping, sprawled across benches or curled up against windows like cats finding the last warm spot. Jacob stood in the vestibule between cars, cold air biting through his coat. Through the smeared glass of the door window, he could see into Margaret's car. She was still awake, sitting upright on her bench, using what looked like a penny candle for light. The little flame threw shadows across her face, making her look older, or maybe just more alone. She was sewing. Her fingers moved steady despite the train's sway, working a needle through dark fabric. Every few stitches she'd pause, rub her eyes. The candle flame wasn't near enough light for such close work. She was straining to see the dark thread against the dark cloth of what looked like her traveling dress. The conductor came through Jacob's car, punching tickets for the night. Same thin fellow with the pomade, though his hair wasn't quite so slick now. Jacob caught his sleeve. "The lunch stop tomorrow, Grand Island." The conductor pulled his arm free. Irritated. 6 in the morning, 15 minutes, no more. The woman in emigrant class, brown dress, auburn hair, she needs meal access. Emigrant passengers buy from platform vendors. Those are the rules. Jacob pulled out his wallet. Let the conductor see the bills inside. She gets Harvey House access. Full breakfast. The conductor's eyes went to the money like a moth to flame. "That's $1.50 you're holding." "Then take it." The money disappeared into the conductor's pocket, smooth as you please. "You can't guarantee she'll use it. Just make sure she knows it's available." The conductor moved on. Jacob stayed at his post, watching Margaret work by that pitiful penny candlelight. A man 3 rows up from her kept turning around, staring at her. Big fellow, shoulders wide as a door. The kind who figured any woman traveling alone was advertising for company. The train slowed for a water stop, no platform, just a wooden tower and a rough siding. Folks started stirring, standing up to stretch their legs even though there was nowhere to go. Jacob waited until there was enough movement to cover his own, then slipped through to the emigrant car. The smell hit him first, too many bodies pressed too close. The sharp stink of the chamber pot that hadn't been emptied since Cheyenne. Tobacco juice where men had missed the spittoons. He walked down the aisle casual-like, as if he was looking for someone particular. The big fellow was standing now, moving toward Margaret's bench with purpose. Jacob got there first, dropped into the empty seat across from Margaret, pulled out a 2-day-old copy of the Omaha Herald, and spread it wide, made himself a wall of newsprint between her and the rest of the car. Margaret's needle stopped moving. He felt her looking at him over the paper's edge. He didn't lower it, didn't acknowledge her, just sat reading the same paragraph about wheat prices over and over, trying to make sense of words that might as well have been Chinese for all the attention his brain was paying them. The big fellow stood in the aisle for a moment, shifting his weight like a bull deciding whether to charge. Jacob turned a page, casual as Sunday morning, but let his coat fall open enough to show the army colt on his hip. Not a threat, Just information. The fellow moved on. Margaret's needle started again. Tiny stitches, neat as his mother's had been, even in that poor light. Her breathing had changed through shorter. Careful, like she was trying not to be noticed. The train lurched forward, water stop over. Jacob waited another minute, counting the clicks of the rails, then stood, folded his newspaper neat, and walked back to his own car without looking at her. But he could feel her eyes on his back the whole way. Dawn came gray and reluctant over the prairie. Grand Island materialized out of the morning mist like something from a dream. Jacob watched from the platform as the conductor approached Margaret, pointed toward the Harvey house. She shook her head, pointed at her purse, that universal gesture of, "I can't afford it." The conductor pulled out his pad, wrote something, showed her. Jacob couldn't see the words, but he saw Margaret's face change. Confusion first, like when you bite into an apple expecting sweet and get sour. Then understanding. She followed the conductor to the Harvey house, got herself a tray, real eggs, not those rubber things the platform vendors sold, toast with actual butter, not lard, coffee in a proper china cup instead of tin. She ate slowly, looking around like she expected someone to tell her she didn't belong there with the paying customers. When she finished, she wrote something on her notepad, tore off the page, left it on the counter. Jacob waited until she'd walked back to the train, then went to look. "Thank you, guardian angel." He pocketed the note. The Harvey house girl was watching him with a little smile. "That your wife?" "No, ma'am. But you wish she was—" Jacob didn't answer. Just left a nickel tip and walked out. The days stretched on like taffy. Nebraska gave way to the Colorado territory, the land flattening out until you could see tomorrow coming. At the noon stop, Sterling Jacob bought 2 boxed lunches from the station, good ones with ham sandwiches and pickles and a slice of pound cake. Walked through Margaret's car like he was heading to the mail car, set 1 box on the empty bench across from her. Kept walking. When he came back through 20 minutes later, the box was gone. But there was something on the bench where he'd left it. A small folded paper. He waited until he was back in his own car to open it. "I see you." His neck went hot. He'd been careless. Or maybe she'd just always been sharper than he gave her credit for. Margaret was no fool. Never had been, even as a girl. Late afternoon now. The train stopped for no clear reason, probably cattle on the tracks ahead. Passengers grumbled and fanned themselves with whatever they could find. The emigrant car's windows were painted shut, standard railroad practice to keep the coal dust out, but it also kept the air from moving. Might as well have been sitting in a bread box. Jacob watched Margaret press a damp handkerchief to her neck. Her face was flushed pink as a spring rose, hair coming loose from its pins in little curls. The woman next to her had fainted an hour ago, taking up half of Margaret's bench, leaving her cramped against the window. That window latch was painted over, but the paint was old, cracked like dried mud. Would break free with the right pressure. But she couldn't know that. Couldn't hear the paint crack if she tried to force it. He waited until most folks had stepped outside to escape the heat. Walked through her car again. Stopped at her window. She was fanning the fainted woman with an old newspaper. Didn't look up. Jacob gripped the window latch, twisted hard. Paint flakes scattered like snow. The latch broke free with a sound like breaking bones. He shoved the window up 3 inches, enough for air, not enough to let in too much coal dust, and kept walking. The air that came through was hot but moving. Better than nothing. Evening painted the prairie gold and purple. They'd stop for supper in Julesburg. Last stop before Wyoming territory. Jacob watched Margaret count her coins again. 5 more days to Sage Creek after tonight. She had maybe $2 left, if that. The Harvey house here was proud of itself, 40 cents for the full dinner. The platform vendors wanted 15 cents for sandwiches that looked like they'd been made last week and left to think about their sins. Jacob found the Harvey house manager, a German fellow with waxed mustaches. The woman in emigrant class brown dress, auburn hair. "She eats on my account." The manager looked doubtful. "We don't usually." "Here's $1.
Keep the change. Just make sure she eats. But Margaret didn't come to the Harvey house. She bought crackers and dried apple slices from the platform vendor. 6 cents. Sat on a baggage cart eating them slow, making them last like they were a feast. Jacob approached from her blind side, then remembered she didn't have a blind side. Not for sound. Never would. She saw him when he was still 10 feet away. Her fingers moved sharp and quick. Stop.
He stopped. She pulled out her notepad, wrote quickly, held it up. I don't need charity. He pulled out his own pad, wrote not charity, friendship. She read it, shook her head, wrote friends don't hide, fair point. He wrote, you asked me not to follow. Her mouth quirked, almost a smile. First one he'd seen. She wrote, yet here you are. He couldn't argue that. The whistle blew. Time to board. Margaret stood, brushed cracker crumbs from her skirt with careful fingers. As she passed him, she pressed something into his hand. Another note. He opened it as the train pulled out. Window fixed. Food appearing. Guardian angel watching. I'm not stupid. Jacob. At the bottom, smaller writing. Harlan, meeting me in Sage Creek, 5 days. Whatever you're planning won't work. But... The writing stopped mid-sentence, like she'd changed her mind about finishing the thought. But there was one more line, written in pencil so light he almost missed it. Thank you for trying. Jacob folded the note. Put it with the others in his shirt pocket. 3 notes now. Each one a little door into what she was thinking. He went to find the conductor. I need to send a telegram at the next stop with a wire office. The conductor consulted his schedule. That'd be Cheyenne. Middle of the night, though. Wake the operator if you have to. Jacob pulled out money. It's important. Who's the message for? Tom Harlan, Sage Creek. The conductor's eyebrows went up. That's the fellow meeting the deaf woman. That's right. What's the message? Jacob thought about what would keep Harlan away from the depot. What would matter more to a gambler than collecting his mail-order bride? Tell him, detained in Cheyenne, railroad dispute over cattle contract. May miss meeting, woman will wait at Sage Creek Hotel. Sign it M. Sullivan. The train crawled through Wyoming territory in the dark, somewhere between midnight and morning, 2 in the morning by Jacob's watch. Though time didn't mean much out here where the prairie stretched black as spilled ink under a mess of stars. Jacob couldn't sleep. His shoulder ached from 3 days of sitting rigid, and his eyes burned from watching Margaret's car through that little vestibule window. She was awake too. He could see her silhouette against the window, sitting upright while other folks sprawled across benches like rag dolls. He pulled out his notepad, tore off a sheet, wrote, "Can't sleep either," folded it small as a calling card, made his way through the connecting doors quiet as his boots would allow. The immigrant car smelled worse at night, sweat gone sour. Feet that hadn't seen soap in days. The chamber pot that nobody wanted to empty. He dropped the note on Margaret's bench as he passed. Kept walking toward the mail car like he had business there. Waited 5 minutes by his watch. Walked back. A folded paper sat on the bench across from her. He palmed it smooth as any card sharp. Returned to his car. Dreams are loud even when the world is silent. He felt something twist in his chest. Wrote back, "What do you dream?" This time when he walked through, she was ready. Took the note from his hand without looking up. Passed him her response in the same motion. Like they'd been doing this dance for years instead of minutes. Water. Always water. The sound of it. I remember sounds in dreams. Lord have mercy. His hand shook as he wrote, "What else do you remember?" Her response. "Your voice. Cracking when you were 13. You were embarrassed. I thought it was wonderful meant you were becoming a man." He had to stop, lean against the cold window. The train rocked and swayed, and his pencil trembled as he wrote, "I remember your laugh. Like creek water over stones." When he came back through, she was crying. Silent tears rolling down her cheeks that she didn't bother to wipe away. She handed him a longer note, paper covered edge to edge with her careful script. "Stop, please. This hurts too much." But when he started to walk away, she grabbed his sleeve, pointed at the empty bench across from her, mouthed the word, "Sit." He sat. She pulled out fresh paper, good paper, not the cheap stuff, like she'd been saving it for something important. Her hand moved steady across the page. filling it with neat lines of script. The penny candle on the window ledge flickered, making shadows dance across her face. She'd always had beautiful handwriting, even as a girl. Her father had been proud of that. At least, she wrote for what felt like an hour, but was probably 10 minutes. Filled one page, then another, finally folded them careful, handed them over, then pointed at him and mimed writing. He read first. I was 12 when the fever came, middle of July, hot as blazes. Father said I was faking to get out of chores. Mother believed him until I started shaking so hard the bed frame rattled against the wall. 5 days burning. Doctor called it brain fever, said I might not wake up. When I did, everyone sounded like they were talking underwater, fading more each day. By September, nothing. Not even thunder. Not even the church bell that had always been too loud. Do you know what silence really is? Not quiet. Silence, like being locked in a glass box. You can see everyone living their lives, see their mouths moving, their faces changing, but you can't reach them, can't be part of it anymore. Father was ashamed. His daughter couldn't hear God's word, couldn't sing hymns, couldn't find a proper husband, because what man wants a wife, he has to write notes to damaged goods. He said, like a cracked plate you hide in the back of the cupboard. They sent me to Aunt Ruth in Chicago that winter. She got me work at the Union Textile Mill, 12 hours a day at the power looms. Perfect job for a deaf girl. Those machines are so loud nobody can talk anyway. Everyone just does their work and goes home to their little rooms and does it again the next day. 3 years I worked there, saved every penny I could after paying Aunt Ruth for room and board. $27 I had hidden in a tea tin. Then Mr. Morrison, the owner, found out I was deaf. One of the other girls told him, hoping to get my position, I was faster than most because I didn't get distracted by gossip. He fired me that very day. Said it was a safety risk. Said I couldn't hear the warning bells if something went wrong with the machines. I wrote to 6 men advertising for wives in the papers. Told them straight up I was deaf but could read, write, cook, sew, and keep house as good as any hearing woman. 5 never wrote back. 1 wrote just to say I was an abomination in the eyes of the Lord. Then Tom Harlan's letter came. Said he didn't need a wife who could hear, just one who could work hard and bear children. Not romantic, but honest. At least I knew where I stood. So here I am, on a train to marry a stranger, because a bad choice is still better than no choice at all. Your turn? Write it all down. I want to know. Jacob's hand cramped just thinking about matching her honesty, but she was watching him with those green-brown eyes, waiting. He wrote, the morning after that kiss by the creek, Father found out. Don't know how, maybe someone saw us. Said I was wasting my time with that Sullivan girl. Said your family had no money, no prospects, nothing to offer. I told him I didn't care about any of that. He hit me hard enough to knock out a tooth, the back one on the left side. Still gone. You can feel the gap if you run your tongue along there. Next day, he dragged me to the recruiting office, told them I was 17. I was barely 15, but big for my age, and they didn't look too close. They needed bodies for the frontier posts. 9 years at Fort Griffin, cavalry unit, mostly patrol duty. Indians, settlers, keeping peace between folks who didn't want to share the same ground. Learned to shoot. Really shoot, not just hunting rabbits. Learned to ride until the horse was part of me. Learned to follow orders even when they made no sense. First year, I wrote you letters. Never sent them. What would I say? Sorry, I disappeared. Father made me do it. Sounded like a boy's excuse, not a man's apology. Mother wrote me about your fever. Said you'd gone to Chicago. Said it was for the best, her words. I wanted to desert right then, find you. But I was a coward. Easier to stay where I was. Follow orders. Let years slip by like water through my fingers. Got promoted regular, made captain last year. Led men into skirmishes that didn't matter over land that wasn't really ours. Got good at not thinking about what I'd left behind. Good at surviving. Discharge came through last month.
Father died 2 winters back. Heart gave out shoveling snow. Mother followed last year. Pneumonia. The farm's mine now. 220 acres outside Austin. Good water from a spring that doesn't go dry. Decent soil for corn and vegetables. Enough pasture for cattle if I can afford to stock it. Was in the Mercantile in Austin when I saw the newspaper with marriage advertisements. Your handwriting jumped off the page like it was yesterday you were teaching me letters by the creek. M. Sullivan, Chicago, seeking husband, must be kind, patient, understanding of special circumstances. I knew it was you. The handwriting, the initials, the special circumstances. Took me 3 days to work up courage to go to that depot in Abilene, to see if it was really you, if you were really going to him.
Then I saw you there, counting coins like they were your last hope, and everything I'd pushed down for 9 years came rushing back like a flash flood. He stopped writing. She was reading as he wrote, her face close to the page in the weak light. She took the pencil from him, added, and, he wrote, and I knew I'd never stopped loving you. But that doesn't matter now because you're right. What I'm feeling looks like pity from where you're sitting. And what else could I offer? You need security. Harlan can give you that. I'm just a broken-down soldier with some land and memories. She grabbed the pencil so hard he heard it crack. You think marrying a stranger is security, a man who might beat me, use me, throw me out when he's tired of looking at his deaf wife. That's not security. That's gambling with my life. At least in Chicago, I knew what each day would bring. He wrote carefully. Then why do it? She stared at the page for the longest time, then wrote in tiny letters like she was ashamed, because at least it's my gamble to make, my choice. Not my father's shame choosing, not the factory owner's fear choosing, mine. Even if it's a bad choice, it's still mine. She looked up at him then, straight in the eyes. Her fingers moved. Why? Then she pointed at him, made the sign for leaving, pointed at herself. The question clear as church bells. Why did you leave me? Jacob held up his hands in the candlelight. The scars showed clear, the one across his palm from a broken saber, the missing tip of his left index finger from a misfired rifle, the rope burn on his wrist from pulling a trooper from a burning wagon. Her eyes traced each mark like she was reading a map. Then she signed, war. He nodded. She signed, changed. Then pointed at him. Not a question. A statement. He nodded again. She pulled the paper back, wrote, we're both different people now. Not the children who kissed by the creek. Those children are gone. He wrote, maybe. But, she took the pencil. But what you think you can save me? Fix everything. Make it all better like a scraped knee. That's what men do. Isn't it? See a problem and have to solve it? But I'm not a problem. Jacob Wade, I'm a person making the best of bad circumstances. He wrote fast, urgent. You deserve better than Harlan. She laughed that silent laugh that shook her shoulders and made her eyes water. Wrote, I deserve not to go deaf. You deserve not to go to war. We deserve lots of things we don't get. That's not how the world works. The train was slowing. Another water stop coming up. She gathered all their papers, folded them neat, tucked them in her bag. Then she signed, enough. Sleep now. But as he stood to go, she caught his hand. Her fingers were rough from factory work, calloused and strong. She turned his palm up, traced something there with her fingertip, one letter at a time. Pressing hard enough he'd feel it for hours. W-H-Y. Then she added a question mark, her finger making the curve of it slow and deliberate. Why was he really here? Why follow her? Why care after 15 years before he could answer? She let go, turned to the window, closed her eyes like she was done with the conversation, done with him. But her hand stayed on the bench between them, palm up and open, waiting. The Dodge City Depot reeked of cattle, 5,000 head waiting in the stockyard south of town, their bawling carrying over everything else like a wall of sound. Jacob stepped onto the platform, legs stiff from 4 days of sitting. Late afternoon sun turned the dust golden, thick enough to taste on your tongue. 30-minute stop. Enough time for the railroad to resupply the dining car and take on water. Enough time for passengers to remember what solid ground felt like. Through the emigrant car window, Jacob could see Margaret bent over her sewing, working on that same traveling dress. She'd already turned the collar and cuffs to hide the wear, making something respectable out of cloth that wanted to give up. Her fingers moved quick and sure despite the bad light in the car. The Long Branch Saloon sat right across from the depot, its doors swinging steady with cowboys going in thirsty and coming out worse for wear. Jacob needed information. In towns like Dodge, saloons knew everything worth knowing and plenty that wasn't. Inside. The place was half empty too early for the real drinking to start. A poker game ran in the corner, quiet enough you could hear the cards hitting the felt. Two cowboys leaned against the bar, nursing beers that had gone warm. A woman in faded purple silk sat at a back table, counting money like it might multiply if she handled it enough. And at the bar, drunk as a lord at 4 p.m, Bart Hutchins. Jacob knew him from Fort Griffin. Thick neck like a bull, knuckles scarred from fights he probably started, the kind who did dirty work and called it business. Bart was talking loud to the bartender, words running together like water over rocks. Told Harlan, get 2 this time instead of 1. 1 for the ranch work, 1 for the investment. Bart laughed, an ugly sound like something breaking. Man's got a head for business, I'll give him that. Jacob ordered whiskey he didn't plan to drink. Stood close enough to hear, but not close enough to be noticed. This about that mail-order bride coming in? The bartender asked, polishing a glass that was already clean. The deaf one? Yeah. Bart grinned wide enough to show a gold tooth. Harlan says that's perfect for the trade. Can't complain to customers if she can't talk. Can't run off if she don't know where she is. And if she don't work out at the ranch. He jerked his thumb toward the woman in purple silk. Plenty of use for a pretty thing that can't scream. The glass in Jacob's hand cracked. Whiskey spilled across the scarred bar, dripping onto the sawdust floor. Easy there, friend. The bartender tossed him a rag. That's good bourbon you're wasting. Jacob set coins on the bar, walked out before he did something that would land him in the Dodge City jail. His hand was bleeding where the glass had cut deep. But he barely felt it. All he could see was Margaret's face, trusting that Harlan at least meant to marry her proper. She was at the water pump behind the depot when he found her, filling that tin cup she carried. Her back was to him, shoulders relaxed for maybe the first time since Abilene. She'd unpinned her hair to roulette it, keep cool in the heat, and it hung down her back like copper in the late sun. He touched her shoulder, gentle as he could manage with his hands shaking. She spun around fast, water flying from the cup. Her eyes went wide when she saw the blood on his hand. She grabbed his wrist, turned the palm up to look at the cuts. Her mouth opened in a silent question. He pulled out his notepad left-handed, wrote, "Need to talk. Private. Important." She looked around. Too many folks at the depot, passengers stretching their legs, railroad workers loading freight, cowboys heading to the saloons. She pointed toward the stock cars at the far end of the platform, where the cattle noise would cover any conversation even for folks who could hear. They walked between the rails, finding a spot between 2 cattle cars that hid them from view. The smell was strong enough to water your eyes, but at least they were alone. Margaret pulled out her handkerchief, wetted it from her cup, started cleaning the blood from his hand. Her touch was careful. Practice the factory had taught her to deal with injuries quick and quiet. No fuss, no wasted motion. Jacob wrote while she worked. Harlan isn't what he claims. She read it, kept cleaning. Her face didn't change. He wrote, I heard his man talking. Bart Hutchins. You know what kind of investments Harlan makes. Her hands went still on his. She looked up at him, then wrote on her own pad. I suspected, the way he phrased things in his letters. Too careful about some words, too crude about others. Jacob's chest got tight. He wrote, then why still go? She unwrapped the torn strip of petticoat hem she'd been using for mending, started binding his hand with it. Because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he just wants a wife who can cook and clean and give him children. And if not, I survived 3 years in a factory. I can survive this. He caught her wrist with his good hand. You shouldn't have to just survive. She pulled free, wrote fast and sharp. Really, what are my other choices? Name them. Go ahead. He wrote, come with me. To Texas. I have land. She was already shaking her head before he finished writing. He kept going. 220 acres. Good water that never runs dry. House needs work, but the bones are solid. I need help. Can't run a ranch alone. I'm offering work. She grabbed the pencil hard enough to snap the point. You don't need anything. You pity me. Poor deaf Margaret. Let me rescue her like some knight in a storybook. He took the pencil back, pulled out his knife to sharpen it. That's not. She snatched it soon as the point was fixed. Then, what love? You think you love me. You love a memory. A 12-year-old girl who could hear your voice. Who laughed at your jokes. Who didn't need you to write everything down. I'm not her anymore. She pulled papers from her bag, shoved them at him hard enough they crackled. 5 letters, each with different letterhead. He read while she stood with her arms crossed. Dear Miss Sullivan, while we appreciate your interest in the position, we require employees who can fully participate in workplace communication. Liability concerns regarding your affliction make it impossible. Not equipped to accommodate special circumstances. Suggest you seek opportunities more suited to your limitations. The last one was the worst, written in a careful hand. A woman who cannot hear God's word has no business teaching children. To place the innocent in your care would be to risk their moral development. Margaret took the letters back, folded them careful as hymn sheets. 6 months of looking for respectable work. Spent my last dollar on postage stamps. Then Harlan's advertisement. Seeking wife. Must be strong. Willing to work. Able to bear children. Physical appearance not important. Defects acceptable, if not hereditary. Defects. At least he was honest about what he saw. Jacob wrote carefully. You're not defective. She laughed. That bitter, silent shake. Tell that to everyone else. Tell that to my father who couldn't look at me. Tell that to every employer who saw me as a liability. Tell that to the world that has no place for women who can't hear. He wrote slow, thinking each word. I'm offering honest work. Bookkeeping you always were better with numbers. Correspondence. Running the house. Fair wages. $20 a month. Your own room. No obligations beyond the work. She studied his face like she was looking for the trap. And when you find a proper wife, some hearing woman who can give you normal children, what happens to me then? He wrote without thinking. There won't be anyone else. Her face changed. Something cracked in her expression like ice breaking on a pond, then sealed over twice as thick. She wrote, Don't make promises out of pity. It's not pity. She pressed her finger against his lips. The touch burned like a brand. She wrote, I know what I am, deaf woman, 27 years old, no family that claims me, no money, no prospects. You're offering charity dressed up as employment, at least with Harlan. I know the bargain. Marriage for survival. Clear terms. The train whistle blew. 5 minutes to departure. Jacob wrote, desperate. He'll hurt you. Use you. Sell you to. She put her hand over the words before he could finish. Maybe, maybe not. But that's my risk to take. My choice. You don't get to make it for me just because you feel guilty about leaving 15 years ago. She started walking back toward the train. He followed, caught her arm. She turned, and he signed clumsy with his bandaged hand. Please. Listen. She signed back, sharp and clear, can't, deaf. Remember, the joke hit like cold water in the face. She pulled free, walked faster. At the emigrant car, she turned back once. Her fingers moved. Thank you for trying. But stop now. She climbed up into the car. Jacob stood on the platform, hand throbbing where the glass had cut deep and she'd wrapped it careful. Blood was already seeping through her petticoat bandage. You boarding or staying? The conductor called out. Jacob climbed into his car, found his seat, pulled out the papers Margaret had dropped, not the rejection letters, but something else. A contract. Marriage contract from Harlan. He read the terms while Dodge City fell away behind them. Property rights all to husband. Earnings from any labor to husband. Children father's sole custody. Wife's obligations household. Farm work. Other duties as required. At the bottom, Margaret's signature. Already signed. Dated yesterday. But above it, Harlan's signature line. Still blank. The train rolled on through the prairie.
Through the windows, Jacob could see Margaret in the other car. She was holding something up to the fading light, another paper, the telegram. The one he'd sent saying Harlan was delayed. She was reading it over and over, her lips moving like she was tasting the words. Then she turned, looked straight through the windows between their cars.
Found his eyes across the distance. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately. You sent this. The train pushed through darkness toward Sage Creek, cutting through prairie that rolled black under stars thick as spilled salt. 10 hours left. Jacob sat with his father's pocket watch in his hand, thumb rubbing the worn brass case. 1:17 in the morning. The oil lamp above him had burned out an hour back, leaving him in darkness broken only by moonlight through the window. Through the vestibule glass, he could see into Margaret's car. She wasn't sleeping. She sat with her small valise open on her lap, taking things out one by one, examining them in the weak light of her penny candle, then putting them back, like she was taking inventory of everything she owned in this world. A thin chemise, mended at the shoulder, 2 pair of stockings, darned at the heels, a Sunday dress, dark blue wool, folded so careful the creases looked sharp enough to cut. She pulled out a brown bottle laudanum from the shape, the kind women took for monthly pains, held it to the light, checking how much was left, put it back. Then a book, leather cover worn soft at the corners. Her mother's Bible, he recognized it from when they were young. She opened it, lips moving as she read. Her finger traced along the lines like she needed to feel the words, not just see them. She closed the Bible, pressed it against her chest. Her shoulders shook once, hard, like something trying to break free. Then she put it away, pulled out paper and pencil. Jacob stood up, joints popping from sitting too long. His bandaged hand throbbed in time with his heartbeat. He walked to the vestibule, stood in the cold air between cars, watching her through the dirty glass. She was writing fast now, pages filling with her neat script. She'd finish one, fold it careful, write a name on the outside, set it aside, start another. The first one she'd finished had his name on it. Jacob Wade, in her careful hand. He knocked on the glass. Useless, she couldn't hear it. But she must have felt the vibration because she looked up. Their eyes met through 2 panes of smeared glass. She held up one finger weight and went back to writing. 5 minutes passed. 10. She finished the second letter, folded it, stood, walked to the door between cars, opened it. Cold air hit them both like a slap. She had to hold her hair back with one hand to keep it from whipping into her face. With the other, she pulled him into the small space between doors, out of the worst of the wind. Her notepad was already out. Can't sleep. He shook his head, wrote on his own pad. You either... She wrote, last night to be Margaret Sullivan. Tomorrow I become Mrs. Harlan.
The words hit him in the chest. He wrote, you don't have to be... She touched his face then, her cold fingers against his cheek. The touch was gentle, like she was memorizing the feel of his skin. She shook her head slow, then wrote, we've been over this too many times. He caught her hand, held it against his face. Her eyes got wide. He wrote with his free hand, awkward with the bandage, I need to tell you something. She waited, her hand still against his cheek. That summer before Father took me, I was working the Jameson farm, sunrise to sunset, 50 cents a day. Had almost $20 saved up, hidden in an old feed sack in the barn. She pulled her hand free, wrote, why? Train tickets, 2 of them, to California, San Francisco, where nobody would know us, where your family name didn't matter, where we could start fresh.
Her mouth opened, no sound, but he saw his name on her lips clear as if she'd spoken it. He kept writing, I was going to ask you to run away with me. Get married by a justice of the peace. Find work, plenty of opportunities out there for folks willing to work hard. The morning Father found out about the kiss. I was coming to ask you. Had my courage all worked up. Then he dragged me to that recruiting office and she grabbed the pencil. Stop, please. He took it back. You need to know, it was never pity, never charity. I loved you then. She covered his hand with both of hers, stopping him from writing more. Her eyes were bright with tears that spilled over, running down her cheeks silver in the moonlight. She took the pencil. Don't say it. Why? Because if you say it now, I'll believe you. And if I believe you, I'll go with you. And if I go with you, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if it was love or rescue, if you really wanted me or just couldn't stand to see me with Harlan. And that wondering will poison everything between us. He wrote, "What if it's both? What if I love you and want to rescue you?" She laughed, that silent shake that was half crying. Both means it's still half pity. She turned to go back to her car. He caught her arm, turned her back to face him. The moon was behind clouds now, leaving them in darkness except for the faint glow from her car's lamps. He raised his hands, signed slowly, making sure she could see kiss, creek, not, pity, promise. Still, promise. Her breath hitched. She signed back promises. Children, make. He signed some, promises. Worth, keeping. She was crying openly now, not trying to hide it. She signed 2, late. 15 years. 2, late. He pulled out the marriage contract from his pocket, the one she dropped in Dodge City, held it up where she could see it in the weak light, pointed to Harlan's blank signature line. Signed, not real. She snatched the contract, looked at it like she'd never seen it before. Wrote, "Will be tomorrow, when he signs." He wrote, "What if he doesn't? What? What if Harlan doesn't show up? What if he never signs?" She wrote carefully, "Then I'm stranded in Sage Creek with no money and no options. Worse than now." He pulled out an envelope from his inside pocket, thick with bills. Wrote, "Yours. No conditions, no obligations. Take it and do whatever you want. Stay in Sage Creek. Go back to Chicago. Go to California. Your choice." She stared at the envelope. Wrote, "How much?" $300. My army severance. Everything I saved. Her hand shook as she wrote, "That's all you have?" "No, I have land. House that needs work but has good bones. Future. You have nothing. Take it." She pushed the envelope back at him. "I can't." "Yes, you can. No conditions. Really, just take your money and go." He wrote carefully, "One condition." Her face hardened. He kept writing, "Give me one day, tomorrow. If Harlan shows up, I'll step back. Let you make your choice. If he doesn't, give me one day to show you what I'm offering. Not charity, not pity, partnership, real work for real wages. Then you decide." She looked out the window at the prairie rolling past, black as the bottom of a well. She wrote, "And if I still say no, then you take the money and go wherever you want. I won't follow, won't write, won't bother you again." She turned the envelope over in her hands. $300 more money than she'd seen in her whole life, probably. She wrote, "Why would you do this?" He thought about lying, making up something about Christian duty or some such. Instead, he wrote the truth. "Because I already lost you once to other people's choices. Your father's shame, my father's pride. If I lose you again, at least it'll be your choice, not theirs." She folded the contract, put it in her pocket with the envelope, wrote, "One day, if Harlan doesn't show." He nodded. She wrote, "I'm still getting off at Sage Creek, still going to the depot, still waiting." He nodded again. She started to go back to her car, then turned, pulled out one of the letters she'd been writing, the one with his name on it, pressed it into his hand. Signed after, Sage Creek, read. Then she was gone, the door closing between them. He stood in the vestibule holding her letter, watching her walk back to her bench. She sat down, pulled that thin blanket around her shoulders, and closed her eyes. But her hand stayed pressed against the window glass, palm flat like she was trying to hold on to something. Jacob looked at the letter. His name in her careful writing, sealed with candle wax, her thumbprint clear in the red wax like a signature. He held it up to what little light came through the window, could see writing through the thin paper but couldn't make out the words. Whatever she'd written, she meant him to read it after Sage Creek, after she was gone. His watch showed 4:30, 5.5 hours to Sage Creek. He went back to his seat, pulled out paper, started writing his own letter, Everything he should have said 15 years ago. Everything he should have said in North Platte. Everything that might not matter if Harlan showed up with a pen in his hand. The train rolled on through the darkness. Somewhere up ahead, the sun was getting ready to rise. Somewhere up ahead, Sage Creek was waiting. In her car, Margaret pulled out the contract again, smoothed it on her lap, stared at that blank line where Harlan's signature should go. Then she took out her pencil, held it over the blank line, started to write something. The train wheezed into Sage Creek Station at 7:14 in the morning. Jacob's watch clicked shut in his vest pocket. He stood at the vestibule window, looking out at the platform. Small depot, wood frame weathered gray as old bones. The town beyond wasn't much more, maybe 200 souls if you counted the ranches spread out around it. Tom Harlan stood beside a black buggy, working a gold toothpick between his teeth. Jacob had seen him once at Fort Griffin, playing Pharaoh in the sutler's store. Same narrow face like a weasel. Same way of standing with his weight on one hip like the world owed him comfort. Older now, 45, maybe 50. Gray at the temples, but trying to hide it with pomade. Vest too fancy for ranch work, with a watch chain thick enough to hobble a horse. Boots polished to a shine that said he never walked through anything worse than dust. Margaret appeared at the door of the emigrant car. She'd changed into her good dress, the dark blue wool she'd been saving. Her hair was pinned up neat as Sunday morning. Every strand in place. Face washed clean. A touch of rice powder to hide the dark circles under her eyes from 5 nights of no sleep. She'd tried to make herself presentable, respectable, like a woman worth marrying proper. She stepped down from the train careful, holding her carpet bag in her left hand, the marriage contract in her right. Her back was straight as a measuring stick, chin up like she was walking to church instead of to a man she'd never met who planned to use her up like a thing. Harlan didn't move to help her down, didn't step forward to take her bag, just stood there beside his buggy, eyes moving over her body like he was counting cattle, checking the teeth and flanks. His head tilted, and he nodded to himself, satisfied with the merchandise. Margaret walked toward him across the platform. Her steps were steady, but Jacob could see her fingers white-knuckled on the bag handle. She stopped 5 feet from Harlan, held out the contract. Harlan took it without looking at her face, glanced at the paper, checking her signature at the bottom, folded it up and stuck it in his vest pocket without signing it. Reached for her arm. Margaret stepped back, pulled out her notepad, wrote something, held it up. Harlan's face went red as a fresh brand. He knocked the notepad from her hand, sent it skittering across the platform boards, grabbed her elbow hard. Jacob could see her wince from 30 feet away, started pulling her toward the buggy. Jacob moved, not running, not aggressive. Just walked out of the train and across the platform like a man with business to conduct. His army colt sat visible on his hip, but his hands stayed relaxed at his sides. His boots made steady sounds on the board's heel. Toe. Heel. Toe. Harlan! The man turned, still gripping Margaret's arm. His eyes narrowed, trying to place Jacob's face. Margaret went white as flour when she saw him. Wade, Jacob said, stopping 10 feet away. Captain Wade, retired, out of Fort Griffin. I know you. Harlan's grip stayed on Margaret's arm, fingers digging in. We played cards once. You won. I always win. Harlan's gold tooth caught the morning sun when he smiled. This is about cards, because I'm busy here. This is about business. Jacob pulled papers from his jacket slow, so nobody got nervous. I want to buy your contract. What contract? The marriage contract, the one in your pocket. Harlan laughed, ugly as a crow's call. She ain't for sale. Wade. Everything's for sale at the right price. Jacob pulled out bills, counted them where Harlan could see. $200. Margaret's eyes went wide. She started signing rapid with her free hand, but Jacob kept his eyes on Harlan. Harlan's expression changed. 200 was serious money, more than most folks saw in a year. Why would you pay that for a deaf woman? I need a bookkeeper, someone who can read, write, do figures. Hard to find out here. Get someone else. I want this one. She has experience. Worked 3 years in Chicago. Knows business correspondence. Jacob counted out the bills again, making sure the sound carried. 200. Cash money. Right now. People were gathering. The station master had come out of his office. Mrs. Holcomb, who ran the boarding house, stood with her arms crossed, watching. 4 men waiting for the eastbound train had stopped their conversation to stare. The town drunk. Old Sherman had even stopped drinking to watch. Harlan looked at the money, looked at Margaret, back at the money. His tongue worked at something stuck in his teeth. 300, 200. That's double what you paid getting her here. How'd you know what I know. Jacob's voice stayed level as water. 200. More than fair. Margaret pulled free from Harlan's grip, stepped back, rubbing her arm where his fingers had left marks. She bent down, picked up her notepad from where he'd knocked it, wrote quickly, held it up to Harlan. What am I worth to you? Harlan's hand came up fast like he meant to slap the notepad away again. Or maybe slap her. Jacob stepped between them, casual as stepping out of the sun. But now Harlan would have to go through him to get to her. Bad business, damaging the goods. Jacob said quiet. Brings down the value. She ain't goods. She's my wife. Soon as I sign that paper, which you haven't signed. Jacob pulled out another paper, the employment contract he'd written on the train, held it where Margaret could see it. I'm offering her employment, $20 a month, room and board, Sundays off, bookkeeping and household management. Margaret read it, her breathing gone quick and shallow. Harlan laughed again. Employment, you mean you want to? I mean employment, work for wages, a business arrangement. Jacob turned to Margaret, spoke directly to her even though she couldn't hear. But she could read his lips if he spoke slow and clear. Your choice. His contract or mine. Margaret looked between them, at Harlan, narrow face going red, gold tooth glinting, eyes that saw her as property already bought, if not quite paid for. At Jacob dusty from 5 days' travel, bandaged hand from the broken glass, offering papers and patience and the right to choose. She looked at the people watching. Mrs. Holcomb nodded at her. Just a little. The station master had his hand on his hip, near where a pistol might be if he was wearing one. The 4 men had spread out a bit, not threatening but ready if things went bad. Margaret pulled the marriage contract from Harlan's pocket before he could stop her, held both contracts up side by side, read them in the morning light while everyone watched and waited. Harlan's contract. All rights transferred to husband. All property becomes husband's. All earnings from any labor go to husband. Children belong solely to father. Wife's duties include household, farm work, other duties as required by husband. No provision for dissolution. No rights retained. Jacob's contract employment for specified duties. Payment of $20 monthly. Private room provided. Sundays free. Either party may terminate with 2 weeks' notice. Clear terms. Clear boundaries. She looked up at Jacob. Her fingers moved slowly. Why he signed back where everyone could see you? No. Why? She turned to Harlan, handed him his contract back, unsigned, pointed at Jacob's contract, then at herself, nodding. You can't do that. Harlan's face was going purple as a bruise. We had an agreement. Margaret pulled out her notepad, wrote in large letters everyone could read. Agreement requires 2 signatures. You never signed. Neither did I. No agreement exists. Mrs. Holcomb laughed out loud. She's got you there, Tom.
Harlan stepped forward, reaching for Margaret. Listen here, you deaf little... Jacob's hand landed on Harlan's chest. Not a push, just a presence. The lady's made her choice. She doesn't get to choose. She's damaged goods deaf, and probably dumb too. Margaret stepped around Jacob before he could stop her. Wrote quickly, held the paper up high so everyone on the platform could read deaf, not dumb, can read, write, and calculate better than you. Your last 3 letters had 12 spelling errors, and your arithmetic was off by $30. I chose not to correct you out of politeness. Someone in the crowd snorted. Then another. Old Sherman started cackling like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all year. Harlan looked around at the laughing faces. His hand twitched toward his vest. He had a derringer in there, probably.
But 4 men were watching, and Jacob's hand rested easy on his Colt, and the station master had found a hickory axe handle from somewhere. Harlan snatched the money from Jacob's hand, counted it to make sure it was all there, stuffed it in his pocket. "This ain't over, Wade." "Yes, it is," Jacob's voice carried across the platform. "Take the money. Get in your buggy. Leave. Don't come back." Harlan climbed into his buggy, grabbed the reins. "She'll run off on you too, Wade, soon as she finds something better. That's what their kind does." He snapped the reins hard. The horse jumped forward, the buggy lurching as it rolled away too fast for the rutted street. Margaret stood very still, watching the buggy disappear in a cloud of dust. Her shoulders started shaking. Jacob thought she was crying until he saw her face. She was laughing. Silent, shoulders shaking, tears streaming down her face, but laughing, like something that had been wound too tight had finally snapped and let go. She signed, "Free, free, free." Then her legs gave out. Jacob caught her before she hit the platform boards. She wasn't unconscious, just spent. 5 days of tension draining out all at once. 5 days of preparing herself for whatever Harlan would do to her. 5 days of fear disguised as resignation. She gripped his shirt, her face pressed against his chest. He could feel her shaking, laughing, or crying, or both. He couldn't tell. Mrs. Holcomb approached. "I've got a room if she needs to rest." Jacob looked down at Margaret. She was trying to stand on her own, but her legs weren't cooperating, like a newborn foal trying to find its feet. He signed "rest room." She nodded, then signed "contract." First. She wanted to sign the employment contract, right now, before anything could change. Jacob helped her to a bench, handed her the contract and his pencil. She read it through again, slowly, carefully, then signed her name at the bottom, Margaret Sullivan. Clear and strong. Handed it back. Signed when? Start he signed now, if want. She smiled then. First real smile he'd seen from her since they were children. It changed her whole face and made her look young again. Made her look like the girl who'd taught him to spell his name with his fingers by the creek. Then her face changed. She pointed at the contract, at her signature, then signed something that made his chest go tight. Not charity. He shook his head. Signed never. Charity. Need you. The ledger balanced on the first try. Margaret set down her pencil, flexed her fingers until the joints popped. Through the kitchen window, she could see Jacob working with the new mare, teaching her to neck rein with the patience of a man who had all the time in the world. May 1881. 13 months since Sage Creek Depot. The kitchen smelled of coffee, good arbuckles. Not the chicory stuff and the bread she'd baked that morning. Her bread now, in her kitchen. In the house that had her name on the deed alongside his. Margaret Sullivan and Jacob Wade. Joint owners. He'd done that last month. Gone to the county office and made it legal. Handed her the paper like it was nothing special. Just another piece of business. She'd cried for an hour. Through the window, she watched him stroke the mare's neck, talking to her steady, even though the horse couldn't understand words any more than Margaret could hear them. But the tone mattered. The rhythm. She'd learned that, watching him these months, how his shoulders settled when he was content. How his hand went to his bad shoulder when weather was coming. How his eyes found her every few minutes like he was checking she was still there. A shadow crossed the yard. Mrs. Henderson's wagon, bringing Sarah for her Tuesday lesson. Sarah was 8. Born deaf like Margaret had become deaf completely. Permanently. The Hendersons had heard about Margaret through the general store owner, who'd heard from Mrs. Holcomb at the boarding house. Asked if she'd teach the girl signs. Every Tuesday for 6 months now. Margaret went out to meet them. Sarah jumped down from the wagon before it fully stopped, her blonde braids flying. Her fingers moved fast. New. Word. Learned. From. Book. Margaret signed back. Show. Me. Sarah spelled carefully. Cowboy. Good. Margaret signed. Now. Show. Sign. Sarah made horns with her fingers at her head, then mimicked riding.
Close enough, she'd refine it over time. Mrs. Henderson climbed down from the wagon, pressed a silver dollar into Margaret's hand. Margaret tried to give it back, she always did, and Mrs. Henderson refused, she always did. Coffee, Margaret signed to Mrs. Henderson, who was learning too, slow but steady. Mrs. Henderson nodded, signed back, thank you. They went inside. Sarah ran straight to the window to watch Jacob with the horse, her fingers tapping the glass excited-like. Margaret poured coffee, noticed Mrs. Henderson looking at something on the shelf.
The marriage license, dated for next Sunday. Mrs. Henderson pointed to it, eyebrows raised in question. Margaret nodded, felt heat creep up her neck. Mrs. Henderson smiled wide, signed, happy, for you, both. It had taken Jacob 10 months to ask. Not with words, they still wrote most important things down. He'd left a note on her pillow in March. I promised you partnership. We have that, but I want more. Do you? She'd written back, define more. He'd written everything, all of it, the whole life, not just the work. She'd made him wait 3 days for an answer. Not because she didn't know she'd known since Christmas when he'd learned to sign Silent Night for her. His big hands moving through the words while snow fell outside. But she wanted him to be sure. Wanted to be sure herself that this was love, not gratitude, not convenience, not two lonely people settling. The third night, she'd found him on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead. Sat beside him on the bench he'd built specially with arms wide enough for two. Took his hand, traced on his palm, Y-E-S. He'd kissed her then. First time since they were 12 by the creek. Different now, his beard rough against her face. Her hands sure and strong from work, both of them knowing exactly what they were choosing. Sarah was tugging at Margaret's sleeve, signing teach, new, thing. Margaret led her to the table, pulled out the slate and chalk they used for lessons. But Sarah pushed them aside, signed no, different. She pointed at Margaret's hand. At the thin gold band on her right finger, Jacob's mother's ring, worn there until Sunday when it would move to her left hand. Pretty, Sarah signed. Thank you. Margaret signed back. Sarah's face got serious. She signed you, love. Him children didn't dance around things. Margaret nodded. How? No, Sarah signed, how, no, love. Real, how did you explain love to an 8-year-old? How did you explain that it wasn't the big moments but the small ones? The way Jacob learned her language without being asked. The way he built shelves at exactly the right height for her. The way he'd never once tried to fix her deafness, just worked around it like it was no different than him being tall and her being short. Margaret signed slowly, every day, choose, him, he, choose, me, many, small, choices, make, big, love. Sarah frowned, thinking, then signed like, breakfast. Margaret laughed that silent shake of shoulders. Signed yes, like breakfast. Every day, choose, make, good, breakfast, together. Sarah seemed satisfied, went back to watching Jacob through the window. Mrs. Henderson wrote on the slate, 3 years I thought Sarah would never have any kind of normal life. Now look at her. Margaret wrote back, define normal. Mrs. Henderson smiled, wrote, you're right. She's perfect as she is. The lesson continued. Sarah was quick, hungry for language. She'd already mastered the alphabet. Basic signs, was starting on sentences. Margaret taught her the sign for horse, then beautiful, then how to put them together while pointing at the mare. Beautiful, horse. Sarah copied it perfect, then added her own observation man. Also, beautiful. Mrs. Henderson saw it, laughed out loud. Margaret's face went hot as a stovetop. She signed to Sarah focus, lesson, please. But Sarah was right, though Margaret wouldn't say it. Jacob had changed this year. The war stiffness had left his shoulders. He smiled easy now, laughed often. Slept through the night instead of pacing with old pains. The work agreed with him, his hands brown from sun. Muscles lean and strong from honest labor. The front door opened. Jacob came in, hat in hand, saw the company, nodded polite. His hands were getting good signed to Sarah hello. friend. Sarah beamed bright as sunshine. Signed back, hello, cowboy. He looked confused. Margaret fingerspelled for him COWBOY. He grinned, made the horn signs at his head. Sarah giggled no sound, but her whole body shook with it. Mrs. Henderson stood, signed time. Go, home, Sarah protested, but Margaret signed next. Week, promise, new, words. After they left, Margaret and Jacob stood in the kitchen, alone. The afternoon light slanted through windows she'd washed that morning, showing the dust motes dancing in the air. The house was quiet. It was always quiet for her. But this was the peaceful kind of quiet, the settled kind. Good. Lesson he signed? She nodded, then signed Sarah. Said, you, beautiful. His ears went red. He signed smart, girl. She threw the dish towel at him. He caught it, laughing. This was their life now. Small jokes in sign language. Working side by side, her keeping the books, him working the cattle, teaching Sarah on Tuesdays, church on Sundays where Reverend Morrison had learned enough signs to include her. Neighbors who'd stopped seeing her deafness as strange and started seeing it as just how Margaret was. Jacob pulled a paper from his pocket, handed it over. A deed transfer. Adding her name to the ranch. Full partner. Not just in work, but ownership. She looked up sharp. They weren't married yet. This was unusual, maybe even scandalous. He'd already pulled out his pencil, wrote, "Don't care what people think. Ranch is half yours. Your work built it as much as mine." She wrote, "We're getting married Sunday. Could wait until then." He wrote, "No. This isn't about marriage. This is about what you've earned, what you deserve. Partnership was always real." Her eyes burned. She signed, "Thank you." He signed, "No, thank you." They stood there in the kitchen, looking at each other. The deed on the table between them, her name next to his, legal, official, permanent. She signed, "Happy." He nodded, then signed something else. A new sign they'd created together, fingers interlocked, palms pressed together. Their sign for complete. She repeated it back. Complete. The sun was starting to set, painting everything gold through the windows. Supper needed making. Chickens needed feeding. Books needed one more check before she closed them for the day. But first, she had something to tell him. She took his hand, placed it on her stomach, still flat, but not for long. His eyes went wide. She fingerspelled February, maybe March, but February more likely. He dropped to his knees right there in the kitchen, pressed his face against her stomach. His shoulders shook. She couldn't hear if he was crying or laughing or praying, but she could feel the vibration through her dress. She touched his hair, going gray early at the temples from too many years of war and worry, felt him press his lips to her stomach, to where their child grew, felt him making sounds she'd never hear promises, maybe, or prayers, or just wonder that they'd come to this from that depot in Sage Creek. He stood, kissed her careful, then signed, "Boy," or "Girl," "Teach," signs. She nodded. Of course. Whether the baby could hear or not, it would know both languages, would grow up in a house where hands spoke as much as voices. He signed, scared. She signed back, yes, but together, scared, easier. He pulled her close, her head against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat strong and steady. The kitchen was cooling as evening came on. Soon she'd need to start supper, cornbread and beans. Nothing fancy. He'd go check the stock one more time before dark. They'd eat at the table he'd built, by the light of the lamp she'd chosen, in the house they'd made together. Tomorrow Sarah would come back for an extra lesson. Next week the Hendersons were bringing 2 other families with deaf children. Word was spreading through 3 counties the deaf woman who could teach signs, who'd married a hearing man and made it work, who proved different didn't mean less. Sunday, they'd stand in church and make it official, though it had been real since that first day she'd signed his employment contract. Partnership first, then friendship, then trust, then love, built day by day, choice by choice, like laying stones for a foundation that would hold the weight of a life. She pulled back, signed supper, need. Start. He signed help. You. They worked together in the kitchen as the sun set over their 220 acres. Her slicing, him stoking the stove, her hands in his hands, speaking in movements and touches in the comfortable silence of two people who'd found their own language. Outside, a meadowlark was probably singing. She'd never hear it, but she could see Jacob whistle along. His lips pursed just so. Could feel the vibration when he hummed. Could watch his face when he looked at her like she was everything he'd traveled 5 days on a train to find. That was enough. More than enough. That was complete. Connecting hearts friends. I need to tell you what became of them. Margaret taught 43 deaf children over the years, not just signs, but dignity. Sarah Henderson grew up to start the first deaf school in West Texas, bringing in teachers from Gallaudet College back east. See, that's what real love does. It spreads out like ripples on still water. Jacob and Margaret's ranch became a gathering place where hands spoke as much as voices. Their daughter, born hearing but raised signing, became an interpreter at the state capitol. But here's what matters most. They proved that different doesn't mean less. That love isn't about fixing someone, but about learning their language. Every Sunday for 37 years, they sat in that same church pew, her reading his lips during sermons, him signing the hymns. This work is inspired by historical accounts of deaf pioneers and mail-order brides in the 1880s American frontier, created solely for entertainment purposes. This story does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All depictions of historical prejudice are included only to show character growth and social progress. This statement asserts that all characters and events are products of the author's imagination, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental.